On this episode of Eat Sleep Drive, we're exploring the American Southwest with a national park road trip. And we're going to find out whether or not the 2020 Land Cruiser is the perfect vehicle for the job. Hello everyone, my name is Kurt and you're watching Eat Sleep Drive. I'm about to embark on a on and off road road trip on the southwestern portion of the United States at places like Zion, Bryce National Park, and even Lake Powell. And as I was about to embark on this journey, I was thinking, what is the best vehicle for this job? Something that is, of course, reliable, has off-road capabilities, but is also comfortable because I'm going to be driving hundreds of miles between these places. So I need all of those things. Enter the Toyota Land Cruiser. You guys have seen in previous videos, I'm a huge fan of these. I actually own an older one, but this is an updated 2020 model, the latest and greatest. And I'm here to figure out whether it is the best or not for this type of road trip. If you haven't already seen the video from last week, I did a full in-depth review on this 2020 Land Cruiser, so go check it out. But this video is going to focus on what makes it great for a road trip like this. And also you're going to see a ton of footage from these national parks, and maybe, just maybe, it will inspire you to take a trip out here. This area of the country is amazing and I highly recommend you see it for yourself. This trip starts in Tokerville Falls, which is a little off-road trail between Vegas and Zion. And I'm told there's a waterfall somewhere at the end. So let's go exploring. The trail is rugged, but not difficult. And although you could do this in most vehicles with a good amount of ground clearance, the Land Cruiser makes it easy. The biggest concern here, if you're on street tires, is the rocks. You have to be careful you don't catch an edge on a rock and puncture your tire. But even though the Land Cruiser made this trail look easy, it was still a ton of fun. With Tokerville Falls complete and the car still intact, the next destination was Zion National Park. The drive to Zion had me reflecting on just how great the Land Cruiser is feature-wise, especially for a trip where the outside temperature is over 100 degrees every single day. So let me show you guys some of the options on this 2020 Land Cruiser that are of the comfort variety. The first thing, and of course, every car has it, is AC, but it is 110 degrees here today and this AC cranks. It's very, very good. The other thing you're going to need to notice here that is very important when you're on a essentially desert road trip are the cooled seats. There's obviously heated seats as well, but for this one, we're only going to be using the cooled seats. And I can tell you already, these things are fantastic. They work very well. And these seats, in fact, are pretty comfortable. It's not uncommon to have cooled seats and of course AC these days, but check this out. I'm opening the center console here. We have a cool box. Now this uses the AC to cool your drinks and whatnot, and I can tell you that, I know you can't tell that this is cold in the video, but this water is actually quite cold and is very nice for a desert road trip. Zion itself is full of many great hiking trails. Unfortunately, rock slides sometimes close these trails, and that was the case during my trip. One of the most photographed spots in Zion, Observation Point, was not accessible by the typical trailhead parking. It is, however, possible to access this spot through a longer hike from a remote trailhead that can only be found by taking your car off-road. Fortunately, I was in the correct vehicle for the job. Another place in Zion that you definitely need to check out is the Narrows. It's basically the portion of Zion where a river cuts through the canyon, and you can walk up the river with walls on either side of you thousands of feet tall. It's not exactly a vehicle-related attraction since you have to take a shuttle to get there, but it's a must-do if you're in the area. Zion is a beautiful place, but there is a lesser traveled national park nearby that offers scenery you basically can't see anywhere else in the world, and that's Bryce Canyon National Park. It's a short 2-hour drive north, and the strange part is, the terrain is completely different from what you see in Zion. Bryce is famous for its hoodoos, which are essentially strangely eroded rocks. And when you walk amongst them, you'd swear you were on a different planet. My favorite part, though, was a section called Wall Street, and trust me, the name makes a lot more sense once you see it. The next destination for the trip was Lake Powell, some 4.5 hours away. And getting back to cars for a moment, it was a good time to test the long-haul road trip capability of this car. Sometimes having an off-road capable vehicle means it rides like trash on-road, but that couldn't be further from the truth for this Land Cruiser. The ride is supremely comfortable and the handling for an off-road vehicle is great. This is largely due in part to the Land Cruiser's ability to adjust its sway bars on the fly. So on the road it can stiffen them up for flatter cornering, but off-road it can loosen them for more articulation. Toyota calls this KDSS, or Kinetic Dynamic Suspension System. I also heavily leaned on the radar cruise control, which allows you to set a speed like a standard cruise control, but if any cars get in your way, it will automatically slow down for you, until they move, at which point the system will automatically speed back up. It may sound unnecessary, but I can tell you that it's much less taxing on the driver compared to constantly monitoring your speed based on the car in front of you. Arriving in Arizona is a treat because you're immediately greeted with a view of Lake Powell, and then you cross a super high bridge which towers above the Colorado River. If you ever come to Lake Powell, you absolutely have to rent a boat to truly experience this place. One day of boating lets you see a lot, but in hindsight, I wish I had at least 2. Of all the places I went on the boat, Labyrinth Canyon was my favorite. The boat was obviously a great way to see the lake from the water, but how about seeing it from above? Ahlstrom Point offers one of the best overlooks of Lake Powell, and wouldn't you know it, it's only accessible by four-wheel drive off-road trail. Yet another reason to bring a Land Cruiser along for the adventure. The majority of the way to Ahlstrom Point is a non-issue for most cars. It's the last 2 miles of the trail that get pretty rugged. While still not very difficult, this was the toughest off-roading the Land Cruiser was put through on this trip, and it absolutely delivered. After hundreds of miles on and off-road, 3 national parks, 115-degree heat, I think it's fair to say that I can form a verdict as to whether or not the Toyota Land Cruiser is the perfect car for this road trip. You kind of have to break this up into multiple facets because you have the on-road portion and you have the off-road portion. Let's start with the on-road portion. The on-road portion, of course, you want something capable of being comfortable, because it's so easy to have a off-road capable vehicle that is horrible to drive on the street. But that's really where this thing shines. So of course you have ample space for all your stuff and people, being that it has 3 rows, so anything you need to take, you can do with this car. But the actual niceties, such as the AC that works in 115-degree heat, of course every car has AC, but not all of them can keep up. You have things such as the cooled seats, which are a fantastic thing. The cool box in the center console kept my drinks cold the whole time, even in, once again, very harsh conditions. And then you have things such as adaptive cruise control, which definitely allowed me to relax more when we're on the highway or even back roads. I use it at pretty much any speed. It does a really, really good job. And then you have things such as the ride quality, which is so good on this car, on road and off road for that matter. And you can really thank the KDSS kinetic dynamic suspension system for that. And then you have the off-road portion where this car really started to shine off-road. It's not the most off-road capable vehicle, but as far as something that you would want to drive in between off-road excursions, it is definitely up there. It has the KDSS suspension, which I mentioned, that will allow for a little more articulation. It has the A-track system, which is basically simulation of a locking differential. While not quite as good, is still very good and useful for slippery situations. This thing has plenty of ground clearance, and despite being taken on some pretty rugged trails, I knew it was going to get me there, and more importantly, it was going to get me home. This thing never skipped a beat on this trip, and I would really recommend it for a trip like this. It's the perfect vehicle. There is one downside, and the only downside to the Toyota Land Cruiser, which is pretty much its entire time of existence, is its fuel economy. It only got 16 miles to the gallon on this trip, which is not great, but if that's the only downside that you're going to see on something like this for this level of comfort and this level of capability off-road, I think you're going to be pretty happy with it. So I appreciate you guys watching as always. This has been another episode of Eat, Sleep, Drive. Hit that subscribe button if you enjoyed the content, and I'll see you guys on the next one. See ya.